Welcome back to American Kindness. Tonight we share a true testament to faith and courage deep in the heart of Montana. It started not with a blizzard, but with the roar of a brutal wildfire, the Red Reaper, chewing up Silver Creek Canyon. Deputy Aaron Blake and his partner, K9 Thor, smelled something darker than smoke. A calculated execution. An elderly couple, the Greens, were shot and their car brutally sabotaged, all for a precious piece of land coveted by a ruthless local tyrant, Mayor Richard Howard. When Aaron refused to bury the truth, he was stripped of his badge. He and Thor went rogue, joining forces with the Greens' niece, a fearless lawyer named Charlie. Their battle led straight to the mayor's ambush at the old Silver Ridge mine. The cost of justice was almost Aaron's life, but his loyalty and Thor's courage proved that light always finds a way, even in the deepest shadow. If you believe in the enduring strength of the American heart, type Amen in the comments below, or share where you're tuning in from. The sky above Silver Creek Canyon, Montana, was the color of old copper. It was an unnatural, choking twilight, not born of sunset, but of fire. A colossal wildfire, nicknamed the Red Reaper by the news crews, was chewing its way across the eastern ridge, turning the crisp autumn air into a thick, poisonous haze. Inside the rattling county patrol truck, Deputy Aaron Blake kept his focus locked on the winding, deserted logging road. At 35, Aaron carried the rigid, quiet confidence of a man who had traded his Marine uniform for a sheriff's badge. He was tall, built broad through the shoulders, a frame that looked more comfortable hauling timber than pushing papers. His dark hair was hidden under a baseball cap that read Silver Creek, and a 3-day shadow dusted his sharply defined jawline, etched deeper by exhaustion. Tonight, his mission was simple: make one last sweep of the mandatory evacuation zone before the fire jumped the canyon floor. Beside him, low and steady, sat his partner, Thor. A magnificent 6-year-old German shepherd, Thor's sable and black coat was already dusted with fine gray ash. His ears were perpetually pricked, and his amber eyes, usually bright with focused energy, narrowed slightly against the stinging smoke. Aaron trusted Thor's instincts implicitly, more than the static-ridden radio reports. Thor wasn't just a K9. He was the thin blue line's last sense of truth in the chaos. They were driving against the tide. Every other vehicle had fled hours ago, chasing the distant promise of safety. "Just another mile, buddy," Aaron muttered, tapping the steering wheel. "Then we pull out." Thor whined, a sound so low it was almost a vibration, and then his head snapped up. His powerful body tensed, and his nose pressed hard against the passenger window. He wasn't focused on the smoke that poured over the canyon walls, nor the distant roar of the blaze. Something else. Aaron slowed the truck, his senses sharpening. "What is it, boy? Hunters? Everyone's gone." Thor let out a deep, guttural growl that Aaron recognized instantly, the sound of instinct registering danger, not fear. The dog then barked once, sharp and decisive, and gestured with his head toward a barely visible, overgrown track leading steeply down to the creek bed. Aaron didn't hesitate. He swung the truck onto the track, the tires spitting gravel and ash. "Lead the way, partner." The descent was brutal. The air grew thicker, heavier with the smell of scorched earth, and disturbingly, something metallic and sharp. Just as the track leveled out, Aaron saw it. At the edge of the creek bed, a black SUV lay on its side, crumpled like discarded foil. It wasn't burning, but a small, persistent tongue of orange flame licked at the rear bumper, dangerously close to the exposed fuel tank. The fire didn't look like an accident caused by a crash. It looked fed. Aaron grabbed his heavy flashlight and rifle. "Stay alert, Thor. This doesn't look right." They approached the wreck cautiously. The driver's side door was jammed shut, but the passenger door had been ripped off its hinges. Aaron swept his beam across the twisted wreckage, his stomach tightening. The front end was unrecognizable. He knelt, checking the wheel well, and froze. The main brake line, a thick, reinforced hose, hadn't snapped from the impact. It was severed clean, almost surgically, by a sharp tool. "Sabotage," Aaron whispered into the chaos. Thor was already on the move, ignoring the wreck. He focused on a small, dark stain in the dry earth. Blood. The dog began following a faint trail of drag marks and uneven footprints leading away from the crash and up a low, rocky embankment, directly toward a thick knot of ancient pines. Following Thor, Aaron found himself in a clearing hidden from the main road. Tucked beneath an outcropping of granite was an old, reinforced root cellar, the kind early settlers used for shelter and food storage. Its thick wooden door, warped and blackened by years of weather, was slightly ajar. Aaron drew his sidearm. "Sheriff's Department. Anyone inside?" Silence. Only the cracking sound of the advancing fire and the labored breath of the wind. Thor whimpered softly and nudged the door. Aaron pushed it open. A gust of stale, humid air, heavy with the smell of earth and sickness, met him. Inside, the light from his beam revealed two figures huddled on the dirt floor beneath a single, moth-eaten wool blanket. They were the Greens, the elderly couple who owned a vast, remote stretch of land near the Idaho border, land coveted by many for its mineral rights. Thomas Green, the husband, lay deathly still. He was a man in his late 70s, naturally reserved and rugged, but now his weathered face was ghostly pale. He had a deep, dark patch of blood soaking his flannel jacket near the shoulder. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow and rattling. This was a man who had been shot, not just injured in a crash. Beside him, trembling violently but fiercely alive, was his wife, Eleanor Green. She was thin and frail, her silver hair stringy and matted, and her eyes were wide with a terrible clarity. She was clinging to her husband's arm, her knuckles white. Aaron knelt quickly, holstering his weapon. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Blake. You're safe now. Help is coming." Eleanor's lips moved, dry and cracked. Eleanor Green was likely in her early 70s, her voice a brittle whisper worn thin by fear and cold. Her hands were small and delicate, suggesting a life spent in gentle domesticity rather than harsh ranch work. "The fire," she rasped, her eyes darting between Aaron and the entrance. They thought the fire would cover it." "Who, ma'am? Who did this?" Aaron pressed, checking Thomas's faint pulse. Her eyes drifted past Aaron's shoulder, unfocused, staring at the small, rusted ventilation grate near the ceiling of the bunker. "We were being watched. Always watched. That thing, it sees everything." She began to shake uncontrollably, her last bit of strength fading. Aaron reached for his radio to call an emergency medevac, knowing the flames would soon make a landing impossible. Then Eleanor grabbed his sleeve with surprising strength, her face contorted by effort. Her next words were a ragged, frantic plea that cut through Aaron's Marine training and struck him deep in the gut. "Please, promise me. Tell Charlie. Tell her the land is hers. Don't let Kevin or Howard touch our home. Tell her to be careful. Tell our little lawyer to be careful." Her hand dropped, and her breath hitched. Her eyelids fluttered and closed. Aaron stared at the ceiling where she had been looking. Hidden deep within the soot-stained metal grate, behind a mesh of old spiderwebs, a tiny, faint red light blinked rhythmically, the telltale sign of a hidden camera, diligently recording the despair and the final, dying words of the victims. He was no longer just investigating a car crash. He was standing in a crime scene that reached far beyond the flames. A scene where a ruthless killer had tried to silence a family for the sake of a promise and a piece of dirt. The whisper, Charlie, was the only trail he had left. The race from the root cellar to the nearest county hospital in Pine Hollow was a desperate blur of scorched earth and flashing lights. Aaron had loaded the unconscious Thomas and the fading Eleanor into the back of his patrol truck, Thor stationed as a silent, watchful sentinel over them. The smell of smoke and panic was suffocating, and the distant roar of the Red Reaper was now a terrifying, hungry cough. Upon arrival, the hospital, a squat brick building standing sentinel against the Montana wilderness, felt both sterile and overwhelmingly fragile. As nurses and medics swarmed the truck, extracting the greens with practiced efficiency, Aaron took a moment to breathe. The weight of Eleanor's final frantic words, Charlie, Kevin, Howard, still pressing down on him. He immediately called Denver. The woman who answered was sharp, controlled, and instantly distrustful. This was Charlotte Charlie Green, the Greens' niece, their little lawyer. Charlie was 30 years old, a rising star in a Denver law firm specializing in property litigation. She possessed a striking combination of academic polish and mountain tenacity. Her auburn hair was often pulled back severely, highlighting the sharp angles of her cheekbones and her intense jade-green eyes. She spoke quickly, her voice carrying the low, authoritative tone of someone used to running courtrooms, not running from wildfires. When Aaron explained the gunshot wound and the severed brake line, her reserve shattered instantly, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. "This wasn't an accident, Deputy. I warned them. Someone has been circling that land for months. I'm flying out tonight. Do not let anyone touch that evidence." Aaron spent the next few hours working the crime scene, fighting against the encroaching fire and the encroaching morning. He secured the evidence from the root cellar, including the miniature, professional-grade surveillance camera he'd carefully prized from the ventilation grate. Outside, he located the exact spot where Thomas had been shot, recovering a single brass 9mm shell casing near the wreckage. He noted the tire tracks, deep, aggressive tread, unlike local ranch vehicles, and took detailed photographs of the brake line. He also discovered a crucial clue near the embankment. Half buried in the soot and mud was a faded circular enamel badge bearing the crossed pickaxe's logo of the long-defunct Silver Ridge mining company. Aaron knew the legends. Silver Ridge had been shut down decades ago, but persistent rumors of unfiled mineral claims, specifically gold and silver veins, still haunted the canyon. Aaron reported his findings to the Pine Hollow Sheriff's Department, requesting a forensics team and a county warrant. He received a lukewarm response, followed by a summons to the town hall. He found himself standing in the plush, wood-paneled office of Mayor Richard Howard. Howard was a man in his early 60s, immaculately groomed, with slicked-back silver hair and a tailored suit that seemed too expensive for a town like Pine Hollow. His face was round, his eyes surprisingly small and opaque, and his smile was a practiced, political facade, warm yet utterly unmoving. Howard had the power to make or break careers in this quiet corner of Montana, and he projected a paternalistic air of benevolent authority. "Deputy Blake," Howard began, leaning back, the scent of expensive cologne filling the room. "A tragedy, absolutely, but a closed book. An open and shut case of old folks losing control in a dangerous situation. We are a small town, Aaron. We need calm, not speculation. Aaron laid the evidence photos, the severed brake line, the shell casing, on Howard's polished mahogany desk. Sir, this wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder, tied to a coordinated effort to silence the Greens. I have a witness, though she's unconscious, and I have evidence of surveillance and a gunshot wound. And I have the names, Kevin and Howard. Aaron watched the mayor's face for a flinch. Howard's smile faltered only for a millisecond before hardening into something cold. An old woman's confused ramblings, Aaron, and a badge from a dead company. You're making connections where none exist, the mayor said, his voice dropping in pitch. He folded his hands. You saved those lives. That's commendable. You should be proud. But I need you to step away. Let the county handle the paperwork. I can promise you a promotion. Sheriff Daly is due to retire soon, if you show good judgment here. We don't need the state poking around in Pine Hollow's business. Aaron picked up his photos, his jaw tight. With respect, Mayor, my job is to find who shot an elderly man and cut the brakes on their vehicle, not to manage public relations for the town hall. The silence that followed was heavy and final. Later that afternoon, just as Charlie Green's flight landed in Denver and she drove aggressively toward Silver Creek, Aaron received the official communication, a temporary suspension pending an internal review, citing unauthorized access to protected information and reckless endangerment during an active evacuation order. The message was clear. Aaron was officially off the case. But the cold burn of injustice in his gut told him the real work had just begun. Aaron stood by his truck outside the station, watching the last wisps of smoke curl away from the canyon. He was no longer a deputy. He was just a man with a dog and a duty. The sound of rapid, determined footsteps approached. It was Charlie Green. She wore an expensive, tailored suit under a heavy leather jacket, looking utterly out of place yet radiating fierce determination. They did it, didn't they? She stated, her green eyes blazing. They benched you. Howard is involved. Now we know why he was so eager to talk to my uncle about that land deal 2 months ago. Now we know who but not where, Aaron replied, looking down the winding road toward the local bar, a place he knew Kevin Moore frequented. I need to find Kevin Moore, and I can't do it wearing this badge. Charlie held up a thin, leather-bound notebook. Good, because officially, I just filed a civil suit against the town for gross negligence regarding my family's safety, citing the sabotage you found. And unofficially, I need a good investigator. I'll run the legal side. You run the street side. I booked a room at the only motel in town. I'm not leaving until the person who did this is in handcuffs. Aaron looked at the determined lawyer, then down at Thor, who nudged his hand reassuringly. He nodded once. All right, counselor. Where do we start? With the obvious, Charlie replied, her gaze cold. Kevin Moore. Where would a desperate man with gambling debts hide in a town this small? Aaron gave a grim smile. The only place they can still get a drink after 10 p.m. As Aaron turned his truck toward the infamous local haunt, the Grizzly Den, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He and Charlie were an unlikely team, operating outside the rules, with Thor as their only official backup. They were entering the heart of Pine Hollow's secrets. But just as they reached the edge of town, a large, dark pickup truck, mud-splattered and menacing, sped past them from the opposite direction. Aaron glanced in the rearview mirror, but the darkness had already swallowed the vehicle. The truck had been parked directly outside the Grizzly Den just moments before, Someone, it seemed, was already watching them. The game, Aaron realized, had started long before they had planned to play. The interior of Aaron's patrol truck cab was cramped, smelling of stale coffee, dog hair, and the sharp, metallic tang of injustice. Outside the neon glow of Pine Hollow's only late-night bar, the Grizzly Den, bled weakly onto the wet asphalt. The large, dark pickup truck that had sped past them moments earlier was gone. A phantom warning. "They knew," Charlie stated, her voice taut, staring at the empty space where the truck had been. She had shed her expensive Denver suit jacket, now wearing a simple, dark turtleneck, making her look less like a lawyer and more like a determined operative. Thor sat between them, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on the entrance of the bar, registering the hostile presence they hadn't even seen yet. "Howard is running a tight ship, counselor. They have eyes everywhere. If Kevin was here, he's long gone." "Then we find him where he was," Charlie countered, pulling Aaron's confiscated evidence bag containing the surveillance camera and a laptop from her oversized shoulder bag. "The recording. Let's see what Eleanor was so terrified of." They drove to Aaron's small, functional cabin outside town, a rustic structure of necessity, not comfort, with a wood stove and an old, scarred workbench. While Aaron unpacked the digital equipment, Thor patrolled the perimeter, his low, continuous rumble a constant, reassuring threat to the surrounding darkness. Charlie, utilizing her technological skill, quickly bypassed the camera's archaic security settings. The screen flared to life, showing hours of static-filled infrared footage. They scrubbed past empty time until the night of the fire, where the footage captured a chilling sequence. 3 figures approaching the root cellar. One was clearly Kevin Moore, his bulky frame identifiable even in the darkness. The other 2 were larger, their faces obscured by ski masks, wearing heavy, oil-stained jackets. The camera captured the moments just before the crash, showing the trio carefully cutting the brake lines and dousing the SUV's rear with accelerant. Then, the flash of the muzzle when Thomas Green fought back, followed by the sickening crunch of the rolling vehicle. The footage wasn't rambling. It was undeniable evidence of premeditated murder. "That's it," Aaron said, the cold truth settling in his chest. Howard needed proof that the Greens were dead before he could seize the land through some legal maneuver, probably citing lack of heirs or abandonment. Kevin was just the muscle. "And I know where Kevin is now," Charlie declared, her voice heavy with realization. "Denver. He owes money to a heavy crew there. He'd run straight back to try and cut a deal to pay them off." Before they could plan the next move, Aaron's suppressed phone buzzed. It was an anonymous text. "Hospital, room 4, now." Aaron's blood ran cold. Room 4 was Eleanor Green's intensive care unit. "They're finishing the job," he breathed. "They knew we'd focus on Kevin." They drove like a bat out of hell back toward Pine Hollow General. The hospital was quiet, bathed in the sickly green light of the late-night fluorescence. Aaron, moving purely on marine muscle memory, led Charlie and Thor through a seldom-used service entrance. Thor moved low, every muscle coiled. They reached Eleanor's hallway. The air felt charged, wrong. A figure in light blue scrubs and a face mask was slipping out of room 4. The figure was tall and broad-shouldered, carrying a distinctive bulk that suggested physical labor rather than nursing duties. This was the man who had driven the dark pickup, Aaron realized instantly. The attacker was a man in his late 40s, perhaps a former miner, judging by his rugged build and powerful hands. Under the ill-fitting scrubs, his frame suggested brute strength. His eyes above the mask were flat, gray, and utterly devoid of expression. A man paid to be a solution. Aaron recognized the ruthless efficiency of a hired gun. "Police! Freeze!" Aaron shouted, pulling his sidearm from its temporary holster. The attacker didn't hesitate. He lunged toward Aaron, not to fight, but to shove a heavy service cart directly into his path, sending medical equipment scattering with a loud crash. He then bolted down the hallway toward the rear stairwell, moving with a surprising, desperate speed. "Thor, get him!" Aaron yelled. Thor launched himself, a sable-black missile, and slammed into the attacker's leg just as he reached the stairwell door. The force of the impact sent the man sprawling. The attacker roared in frustration, scrambling to regain his footing. Thor, disciplined but ferocious, had a firm, non-lethal grip on the man's shin, preventing him from standing. As Aaron rushed forward, the attacker managed to tear his leg free, but not before a piece of the man's loose scrub pants tore off, revealing a heavy leather belt cinching a pair of dirty work pants. More importantly, the torn piece of fabric had a small, faded Silver Ridge Mining Company patch stitched crudely onto it. The attacker kicked the heavy metal door shut and clattered down the stairs. Aaron reached the door and found it had a heavy-duty combination lock, now securing it from the inside. They were blocked. Charlie, who had been guarding the room, rushed to Aaron's side, her face pale but determined. "Eleanor, I'll check on her." She looked at the lock and the torn scrub fabric in Aaron's hand, then back at the secure door. "He locked us in. He's heading to the main exit." Aaron stared at the patch, his jaw tight. "Howard is using the old mining network for his dirty work. This is bigger than Kevin. They tried to kill a federal witness in a hospital. This isn't just about the land anymore. This is about power." He shoved the patch into his pocket, turning to face Charlie. "We need to get out of here. And we need to get to Denver. If the man behind that patch is Howard's cleanup crew, then Kevin is their next target." Aaron glanced back at the locked stairwell. The silence on the other side was complete. Too complete. Thor whined, his ears pinned back, not toward the stairwell, but toward Eleanor's room. "Wait," Aaron breathed. "Why did he lock the door? He knew we'd just go back to the service entrance." "That lock wasn't meant for us, Charlie." They both looked toward room 4. In the dimly lit hallway, the electronic monitor outside Eleanor's room began to emit a chilling, steady, flat beep, a sound that signaled not escape, but code blue. The flatlining beep from the monitor was a physical shockwave. Charlie, fueled by panic and legal training, a strange combination of adrenaline and precision, screamed for the nurses and simultaneously began CPR, ignoring the chaos. Aaron, a man of action, knew the attacker's brief diversion was a calculated strike, designed to force them into flight or distraction. He ripped the heavy combination lock from the stairwell door with a crowbar and sprinted down the hallway, Thor a dark blur beside him. The attacker was already gone, having melted into the pre-dawn shadows outside. The code blue was a brutal, successful diversion, but Eleanor miraculously survived, stabilized by Charlie's intervention and the quick arrival of the night shift staff. "He didn't want to kill her with a clean shot," Aaron stated hours later, standing with Charlie at his cabin, the surveillance footage looping silently on the laptop. "He wanted to buy time, make it look natural, or distract us. It's a message. Stop looking, or the rest of your family dies." Charlie, exhausted but resolute, had changed into hiking boots and a durable fleece, looking prepared for the Montana wild. She had just finished posting a cryptic, legally dense notice on her personal social media, hinting at the existence of a missing mineral claim deed that bypassed Thomas and Eleanor's will, legally confirming her right to the Silver Creek land immediately. It was the bait. If Kevin thinks I have the deed, he'll panic. He knows Howard will throw him under the bus the second the land is secure. And Howard? Aaron asked, checking the action on his personal hunting rifle. He was no longer a deputy, but a heavily armed citizen protecting a witness. Howard is too slick to chase a public civil suit. He wants the physical claim, the evidence of gold. He'll send his cleanup crew, your attacker, to intercept me and seize that mythical document before I can reach the county registrar's office in Helena. Charlie zipped her jacket. Jade green eyes focused and cold. We use the bait to flush out the big fish. We're going to the Silver Ridge mine. Aaron nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. The old mine site was a desolate, jagged scar on the landscape, located deep in the canyon. A perfect, forgotten place for a confrontation. It was the heart of the conspiracy. They drove Thor and Aaron's truck to the furthest usable road, then hiked the remaining 3 miles through frozen, uneven terrain. Thor led the way, his instincts now keyed to the faint scent of diesel and the attacker's distinctive work boot tread Aaron had memorized from the hospital floor. They arrived near midday. The Silver Ridge mine was a tableau of abandoned greed, rusted derricks, collapsed shacks, and a dark, gaping mine shaft entrance sealed with a padlocked chain. Aaron quickly set up an ambush position behind a crumbling concrete hoist foundation. Charlie, clutching a worn leather satchel, the deed bag, and a satellite phone, positioned herself in the center of the clearing, fully exposed. It took only 40 minutes. Thor, laying low beside Aaron, gave a soft, urgent woof. 2 dark figures emerged from the tree line. One was the attacker, the big, expressionless man from the hospital. The other is shorter, younger, wearing similar soiled mining gear and carrying a heavy length of pipe, the second accomplice from the surveillance video. Aaron recognized their cold, practiced movements. They were here for violence, not negotiation. They moved on Charlie instantly. "Don't move, counselor," the attacker commanded, his flat voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Give us the bag, and this is over." Charlie, terrified but standing her ground, threw the satchel towards them. The younger accomplice scrambled to grab it. That was Aaron's cue. "Thor, go!" The German shepherd launched himself, low and fast, impacting the young accomplice's chest like a battering ram. The man gasped, the pipe clattering away, Thor pinning him instantly, his growl a sustained, terrifying sound. The attacker, however, reacted with brutal speed, pulling a heavy-duty mining knife from his belt and sprinting towards Charlie. Aaron fired a warning shot from his rifle into the dirt near the attacker's feet. "Drop it! Sheriff's Department!" The attacker hesitated for a crucial moment, glancing toward the sound, giving Charlie time to duck behind a stack of rusted oil drums. But before Aaron could reposition, a third voice, wild and desperate, cut through the noise. "No! That's my ticket!" Kevin Moore stumbled out of the main mine shaft, covered in soot and clearly disoriented, looking more like a frightened animal than a criminal mastermind. He was 39, his face gaunt, his short blonde hair matted with sweat. He was holding a rusty pickaxe handle like a club. He saw the commotion, the fallen accomplice, Thor and Charlie, and, focused only on the mythical deed, he charged Aaron, screaming. Aaron was forced to drop his rifle and engage Kevin in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle. Kevin fought with the desperate strength of a man who had everything to lose. They grappled, slipping on the muddy ground, rolling violently toward the steep embankment overlooking the canyon creek. Aaron managed to land a clean blow, but Kevin recovered, pushing Aaron hard toward the edge. Suddenly, a clean, authoritative voice boomed from the trail entrance. "Hold it right there! Everyone down!" Aaron looked up. Mayor Richard Howard stood 20 yards away, no suit now, but a heavy parka, his face contorted in a mask of panic, flanked by 2 uniformed county deputies. Howard had arrived, but not alone. Aaron realized with sickening clarity that the mayor wasn't expecting a confrontation. He was expecting to find the deed and have his 2 henchmen eliminate Charlie and Aaron, then blame the deaths on Kevin. Howard had brought his own witnesses, the county police, to frame the scene. Aaron threw Kevin off him, stumbling back from the cliff edge. Kevin, seeing the mayor and the police, screamed one final damning statement. "Howard, you promised me half the claim if I killed them. You did this!" The mayor's calm facade crumbled. He pulled a small silver pistol from his pocket and aimed, not at Aaron, but directly at the now cornered Kevin. Before Aaron could react, Howard fired. The sharp report of the small-caliber weapon echoed through the canyon, and Kevin Moore, struck squarely in the chest, staggered backward, his eyes wide in shock. He stumbled over the edge of the precipice and vanished into the ravine below, taking his confession, and possibly Aaron's chance at justice, with him. Howard stood over the edge, smoke curling from his pistol, his political mask fully restored. "Deputy Blake, thank God you're safe. I arrived just in time." The murderer resisted arrest and attempted suicide by falling. He turned to his deputies, his voice chillingly calm. "Secure the scene and cuff Mr. Blake. He's under arrest for unauthorized discharge of a weapon and obstruction of justice. The mayor of Pine Hollow just saved your lives." The silence that followed the gunshot was absolute, broken only by the scrape of the 2 uniformed county deputies pulling handcuffs from their belts. Aaron was kneeling on the muddy ground, stripped of his rifle and his authority, watching the smoke curl from Howard's silver pistol. The mayor stood over the ravine, a smug architect of fabricated reality. "You heard the confession, Deputy Blake," Howard stated, his voice ringing with false authority. "The poor fool was desperate, resisted arrest, a clean finish to a messy crime. Now let's get you secured. Obstruction of justice is a serious charge." Aaron felt a wave of icy despair, not for himself, but for the lost evidence. Kevin's dying scream was now just noise swallowed by the canyon, and the deputies were complicit witnesses. He met Howard's gaze, jaw tight, then glanced at Thor, who was still silently pinning the younger accomplice under the hoist foundation, his low growl a promise of violence should anyone move against Aaron. "You're wrong, Mayor." A calm, sharp voice cut through the tension. Charlie Green stepped out from behind the oil drums, her satchel clutched tight, her gaze fixed entirely on Mayor Howard, ignoring the 2 armed deputies. "You didn't just save yourselves. You murdered a potential witness, Mr. Moore, and I recorded his dying declaration. Both the deed and the evidence are secure." It was a bold, terrifying lie. Charlie hadn't been able to secure Kevin's confession, but she had secured her position. While Aaron struggled with Kevin, Charlie, hidden behind the drums, had used her satellite phone to transmit the surveillance video from the root cellar, which she had been continuously streaming from the laptop in Aaron's cabin, straight to her managing partner in Denver and to a trusted contact at the Montana State Attorney General's office, citing the mayor's imminent arrival as the final piece of the conspiracy. She knew Howard wouldn't dare risk a sweep of the cabin now that state forces were closing in. Howard faltered, his political mask finally cracking. "What evidence? You have nothing. That bag is empty." He lunged toward Charlie, his eyes wild with fury. But Thor, recognizing the shift in threat, let out a short, deafening bark, abandoning the accomplice and placing his massive body squarely between Charlie and the mayor. The speed and intensity of the dog's defense froze Howard in his tracks. "You just confessed to murder, Mayor," Charlie stated, her voice shaking but steady. "And that dog is the only thing stopping me from calling the FBI right now. I have the motive, the accomplice statements, and the video showing your men cutting the brakes. You are done." The two deputies, witnessing the mayor's breakdown and facing a standoff with an unmoving German shepherd protecting a frantic lawyer, shifted nervously. They were local law, not hardened criminals, and the threat of state and federal exposure was a line they were unwilling to cross for Howard. Suddenly, the sound of multiple sirens, loud and authoritative, echoed from the canyon road. Not Pine Hollow's familiar whine, but the long, low thrum of the Montana State Police. Charlie's call had landed. The state troopers swarmed the mining site. They quickly secured the two remaining henchmen, one pinned by Thor, the other cowering, and found Aaron's rifle. Howard tried to regain his composure, stepping forward to greet the arriving state captain. But the sight of the mayor standing over the body of Kevin Moore, pistol still smoking, was too much even for the official narrative. Howard was placed under arrest for first-degree murder and conspiracy. The political facade of Pine Hollow had crumbled. The ensuing investigation unfolded like a cheap novel. The surveillance video from the root cellar, combined with Charlie's documentation of Howard's suspicious land dealings and the deputy's nervous testimonies, was enough to seal the case. Aaron was formally reinstated and cleared of all charges, receiving a rare public apology from the county sheriff's department. The true heroes, however, were recovering. Thomas Green was discharged, his gunshot wound healing, though he remained quiet and contemplative. Eleanor Green, despite the Code Blue incident, showed the resilience of the mountain woman she was. Her first visitor was Charlie, followed closely by Aaron and Thor. Eleanor, holding Thor's huge paw, gave Charlie the document Aaron had promised. Not a deed to a mine, but the original land grant, signed in the 1880s, which explicitly designated the land as a wildlife and timber reserve, legally preventing any mining or resource extraction in perpetuity. Kevin's greed and Howard's ambition had been based on a historical lie. 1 year later, the Red Reaper's scars had faded, replaced by new green growth. Aaron, promoted to sheriff of Silver Creek County, stood on the ridge overlooking the land, now officially established as the Green Family Preserve. He wore his badge with renewed purpose. Beside him, Thor, now famous, accepted a gentle scratch behind the ears. Charlie Green, now a frequent visitor, stood with them. She had traded her Denver courtroom for Montana's quiet advocacy, establishing a nonprofit to protect the preserve. She looked out at the rolling hills, green and serene. "We kept the promise, Aaron," she murmured. "We kept their home." Aaron nodded, a genuine, easy smile replacing the fatigue that once shadowed his face. "We did. And we proved that in a canyon full of shadows, sometimes all it takes is one honest lawyer, one good man, and one loyal dog to let the light shine through." He looked out over the vast, peaceful landscape. The kind of goodness they fought for wasn't easy or loud. It was quiet, persistent, and always worth the fight. The story of Silver Creek Canyon was no longer about greed, but about the enduring strength of the American heart.